I'm tying Hofland's Fancy on a number 10 sproat hook with claret thread. I'm using the illustration in Mary Orvis Marbury's book, Favorite Flies and Their Histories, as my guide. I'm going to use 3 barbs off of this rooster pheasant tail feather. These are the feathers that are at the base of the tail. I find them to be suitable for tails because they are feathers that whose barbs do not have a lot of barbules. So feathers are made up of a stem or rachis. I'm going to take my thread underneath once to kind of lift them up a little bit, wrap back down enough to catch them in, and then cut off the butt ends. Feathers are made up of the stem, which is called a rachis, and then the fibers on that stem are generally called barbs. And then the barbs have finer fibers on them called barbules. And it is the barbules that tend to act like a Velcro to make the barbs stick together. These barbs don't have that quality, so they separate nicely and work better to not stick together. I'm putting a little bit of wax on my thread that'll help the red dubbing that I'm using for the body to stick to the thread a little bit better. Any red dubbing is as good a guess, although Mary probably used wool, and I don't have any red wool, so I'm not even really sure what this red fiber is, but it works. It's not a real buggy fiber, so the body will be fairly even and clean, much like the one in the illustration. And I'm going to try to get a little bit of a taper in it, so point it at the beginning of my dubbing loop, or my dubbing strand, dubbing noodle, and then wrap it up towards the eye of the hook to add some more dubbing. A little bit of a taper would be okay, although the illustration has a pretty even cylindrical body, not much taper to it. Wetting my fingers helps a little bit too with cleaning up the dubbing as I twist it onto my thread. I'm getting a little skinny there actually, so I'll come back and need to wrap up over a little bit closer, tighter. I don't want the body to get thinner as it goes forward. That would not look right. And then be sure I leave plenty of room at the front for the hackle and the wing. I'm using what I call a webby brown rooster feather for the hackle. I think the illustration really does show the finer fibers of a rooster as opposed to the really webby, wide hackles on a hen. Clip off the fluffy stuff at the end. I'm going to pull down on the barbs at the butt end now, and I'm going to clip those short, giving that a crew cut. That's not my term, but it does create a good tie-in because it has those tiny little barbs then for the thread to catch. And I have tied it with the shiny side up so that as I wrap that feather, the barbs will bend, curve back towards the bend of the hook. This is a wet fly. The dry flies had not really, or dry fly fishing had not really come into vogue yet when this fly first appeared in T.C. Hofland's book, British Angler's Manual, in 1839, nor when it was tied as a favorite fly in the United States in the later 1800s. But I think they did use this kind of webbier, longer barbed rooster feather. That's what it looks like to me in the illustrations, although they were tied in like we would tie in a wet hackle now. So in order to get that wet hackle appearance, I'm just going to wet my fingers and pull back on all the barbs and wrap up over that end of that feather and the barbs to make them to lean back. Find that tip and snap it out. I suspect that the wing that is on the fly in the illustration was what's called bustard, but it is an endangered bird in our world today, and so we're not going to use bustard feathers. J. Edson Leonard in his book Flies, has 4 versions of T.C. Hofland's fancy, and he simply says that it's a yellow and brown wing. He doesn't give it a particular bird for it. I'm using wild turkey, and I've taken slips off of the tip of the turkey where that color changes. You have the dark brown and the light brown, so you kind of get that what might be considered a yellow-brown color wing. So I pinch it tightly and then wrap it in. I can check the backside too to see what that looks like. I'm okay with that. The hackle's gotten kind of wild, but I think that's what happens when you tie a wing in over the hackle, and that's really the way that the Orvis tiers tied their flies. So clip it out, keep a clean eye. Mary and her company tires did not have to worry about keeping a clean eye because they tied on a hook that did not have an eye. They used a strand of gut, which is the silk moth caterpillar's silk gland and its content that were dissected, stretched, and twisted together to make a leader. They tied a loop into the end of the leader to attach to the fly line. I used claret thread because I think that's the color of the head on Mary's fly, and she did not use claret thread. She used either black or red silk and then lacquered the heads. Instead, I'm using a claret thread, and I'm dropping a drop of diluted goop on it, and when this dries it will be clear instead of dark like it is, and match much more the color of the Orvis flies. Then, to make sure that the eye is clean, I'm going to just pass a hackle tip through it and make sure that it is tippet ready.